Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the crisis in the South China Sea. If I could get the slide to change. So a bit of a background. The sea is 1.4 million square miles. It is the second busiest shipping lane in the world. Half of every supercarrier travels through the Strait of Malacca every year. Supercarriers are the large cargo ships as well as super tankers, which carry oil. Um, that all of that trade culminates to $3.37 trillion passing through the South China Sea in 2016, according to the Council on Foreign Relations in 2018. Additionally, 125 billion barrels of oil are trapped beneath the surface, and 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas are trapped below the surface. As a comparison, the United States has 39 billion barrels of oil in its reserve today, and China only has 25 billion barrels in reserve. So some of the countries involved with the conflict in the South China Sea is China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. These are all the countries that have claims to exclusive economic zones in the South China Sea, as well as some of the islands that are remote within the sea. It doesn't show it on this map. It does on a different map that I have in my presentation. But in this area, it's the Paracel Islands, northwest, South China Sea, and then down here, southeast, is the Spratly Island chain. Okay. So China has came out with this 9-dash line approach to it. So they claim that everything within these lines here is China's territorial waters. Yeah, that's a bit ridiculous there. So there is a law, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, UNCLOS, states that a country has a territorial zone of 12 miles off their shore. That means other country ships cannot come within this zone. Additionally, there is an exclusive economic zone 200 miles from the coast. So that means that country has the rights to everything living and non-living below the water in that zone, but other countries are allowed to travel through it. Also, man-made islands and uninhabitable islands are excluded from this. So, as I'll talk later, Fiery Cross Reef, Mischief Reef, they are not included to expand a country's exclusive economic zone. The Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Danny Russell, said in a testimony on February 4th, 2014, under international law, maritime claims in the South China Sea must be derived from land features. Any use of the 9-dash line to claim maritime rights not based on claimed land features would be inconsistent with international law. The international community would welcome China to clarify or adjust this 9-dash line claim to bring it in accordance with international law of the sea. So right there, he's saying basically that all of China's claims here are bogus. Next, I'm going to talk about man-made islands. On the left here is Fiery Cross Island. And then on the right, it is Woody Reef Island, um, or Woody Island, that was built on a reef. So these islands were previously just sandbars, so something like this here, barely anything above water level would show. And they would bring large boats in with pumps to pump sand and sediment on top of that sandbar to slowly raise it up. And as you can see here, both contain deep water harbors, both have 10,000-foot runways. They're loaded with offense and defensive capabilities, barracks, missile defense systems, electronic warfare systems, and most concerning, the DF-26 missile system, which is a solid fuel rocket system, also called the Carrier Killer, which, if it was launched in rapid succession, could overwhelm an American carrier's defenses. Which that's the United States' main platform of operation for operations in the South China Sea, because there's a limited amount of bases around to expand our operations. Now I'm going to talk about the Chinese aggression in the region. A lot of conflicts with Vietnam ever since the 1970s. So in 1974, the Paracel Island chain, which is within Vietnam's exclusive economic zone, there were 53 Vietnamese killed in a exchange of gunfire. In 1988, another incident between China and Vietnam occurred, where both navies were firing machine guns at each other's boats. There was an undisclosed amount of casualties, but both boats were damaged by gunfire. The Johnson South Reef skirmish in 1988, Vietnamese defenders were attacked by Chinese landing craft that were trying to take over islands on the Spratlys. The Chinese killed some Vietnamese and took 9 others prisoner. They also ended up gaining 6 islands in the Spratlys because of that operation. On May 7th, 2014, a Vietnamese ship was trying to create an oil rig off the coast. A Chinese vessel attempted to interfere with them, caused a collision. 6 Vietnamese were injured in that. Also, there's many U.S. operations going on in the South China Sea. One of the examples that I have was from class about 2 years ago, I believe. There was a naval aviator in charge of some kind of system on a submarine reconnaissance airplane who would fly near the Spratly Islands over Chinese airspace. Chinese would send really threatening radio signals to them, or radio messages, but those are all taken with a grain of salt. But eventually, or sometimes, a Chinese plane would come up to intercept, which then causes a whole bunch of other issues. There could be accidents with collisions midair. It's just very dangerous what that could provoke. So basically, everything comes down to 2 different outcomes. The first is war, or the second is a diplomatic solution. Obviously, war would be costly for everyone involved. There could be a nuclear response. There could be economic crisis because of the amount of shipping that goes through the South China Sea, especially the Strait of Malacca. That strait would be targeted right away because of its importance to China. all of the oil flowing from the Middle East to China, the United States would attack, try to cut off all that oil. Uh, Also, another area of attack could be the man-made islands. They are basically immobile aircraft carriers, great platforms to launch any military operation off of. Um, so that's how China has the opportunity advantage there. Some of the Chinese targets would be U.S. carriers and Pacific military bases. Limit our presence in the region, hopefully, or not hopefully for us. A diplomatic solution would be favored for everyone involved. Obviously, war is the last resort. However, all countries must address the 9-dash line policy. This needs to be led by the UN and ASEAN countries, which were all the countries in the South China Sea, excluding China. We would also need to discuss the historical claims that China's been making. Some of them are false, some of them are overlapping with other countries. It's hard to remember or hard to find records of the history if it's just fishing vessels landing on these islands and claiming them. They're not very substantial claims on either side. They also need to address the uninhabitable islands and how that sometimes can be used as a way to expand their exclusive economic zone. In writing, they can't, but somehow this is getting all confused, and it is happening. But playing devil's advocate here for a second, with all of America's freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, which I believe are very helpful and necessary for trade in the region and trade worldwide. In fact, China brings up a good point. What if they had operations in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Caribbean? Yeah, kind of not the same, because we're not actively taking over countries in the Caribbean. But technically, they could, in some capacity, start doing that. Yeah, not likely, but just playing devil's advocate, it would raise tensions. So overall, I think the best solution is to find a diplomatic approach. But if that's not possible, there needs to be limits on what China can keep taking from these countries' sovereignty. They can't keep taking islands from Taiwan, from Vietnam, from the Spratly Islands. It's infringing on everyone's sovereignty, and eventually I could see it leading to an effect on world trade and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.